alumni of the DeVos Urban Leadership Initiative, and they are welcome as well. But when you do talk, here are the following ground rules. If you can keep your audio muted while you're not speaking, but we also ask that you keep your camera unmuted for the sake of transparency, healthy engagement, and nonverbal communication. Introduce yourself, and if you're a DVULI alumni, what city you are in and graduated from when you do talk. If there is anything in the background of your screen that you feel might be inappropriate, we would ask that you would, at that point, blur your background, okay? Just for the sake of appropriateness. Please use the chat for positive reactions, resources, and/or contact information or reactions. If you are in transit, we ask that you do not use the chat and that you keep your eye on the road at all times or pull over and park. If for any reason whatsoever something causes harm to you while you are driving, we have to make this disclaimer: this call and our organization is not responsible for any harm caused to you while you're driving and on Zoom, okay? On that note, it is my privilege and honor to introduce our moderators and our guests for today. David Medina hails from Philadelphia and is an alumni of our program. Ann Heerde hails from right here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I am, is an alumni of our program as well. And then the distinct honor I have also is to introduce our guest, Bernard Franklin, who was my city coordinator. And when I went to the program, and my mentor as well. And so happy to have him be a part of our conversation also. A good number of you are here, and we just want to say thank you so much. Again, when it's your opportunity to unmute and speak, if you have a question or comment, feel free to jump in. I'm going to turn it over to David and Ann and let them take it from there.
All right, thanks, Gerald. Much appreciated. Hi, everybody. It is really good to see you. As Gerald mentioned, my name's Ann Heerde, and I am Grand Rapids, class of 2000. So it is a pleasure to be with you guys here today, and really thankful for your participation today. So as we talk about youth mental health, I was kind of encouraged to think about what are some statistics, right? What are we looking at for some data? So if anybody doesn't mind, I hope not, I'm just going to share my screen real quick rather than trying to explain the data. I'd rather just actually kind of show you a couple of slides real quick that allow for us to just kind of take a look at that data. So hopefully everybody can see my screen with some of that youth mental health data on it. So I think this is kind of some interesting stuff here, right? When we look at, according to the CDC, the Youth Risk Behavioral Surveillance System, the percentage of youth who have in high school who've reported experiencing persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness has increased over the years, which for some of you might be like, yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer, Ann. I am definitely seeing that, right? According to this data, it says in 2013, 30% of high school students were expressing that concern, and in 2023, it was 40%. As we also take a look at data as published by the Mental Health of America in 2024, 20% of 12 to 17-year-olds were experiencing at least one major depressive episode in the past year, which was certainly up from 15% in 2022. And then this one breaks my heart. I got to be honest, as a mental health professional doing this for a couple of decades now, 56.1% of youth did not receive any mental health treatment, according to Mental Health America. And that number is up from 48%, which obviously that is not the direction we want to be going. And then this next slide, I also think is really interesting. And then I'll be kind of curious how some of this data resonates with your work. We take a look at this data, and this is actually a couple years old. I think this is interesting. Then we take a look at kids' mental health and what happens with trauma and how much trauma has really been in the forefront for so many of us in very different capacities, right? A couple of those data points. 70% of children and youth in foster care have experienced at least 2 types of trauma. 93% of adolescents with psychiatric inpatient hospitalizations have trauma. 90% of youth involved with juvenile justice have been exposed to at least potentially one traumatic event. 68% of youth exposed to violence before graduating high school. Multiple ways, right? For those of you who work with the homeless youth population, 72% of youth who run away and are homeless report being exposed to trauma. I'll be honest, I think that number should be much higher. But anyways, you kind of look at just some of those data points, right? And again, we could talk about data for hours and hours on end, but I'm much more curious to hear as you think about some of those statistics, do they resonate with your work? Are you hearing and seeing the same things, even anecdotally? What are you seeing and experiencing? And is there any way that data, especially data like this, might be shaping the work that you're doing with youth today? Love to hear from people.
So this is Stephen Berkeley. Hello, everyone. I am actually not, I didn't have the privilege of being a participant of the DVULI program. And I always hear wonderful things, but I work with Eric Johnson with STARS. So he asked me to be on the call because he could not be on the call. But all of those, I think almost all of those resonate with me. And so I am the high school program and mentor manager at STARS for our after school programs. And so we have several things in addition to all of the things that you mentioned. So the day of the election, we were in program and we talked about it, the students, and we watched it. So there's trauma there. With the fires in Pasadena, we're serving students and their families through other like wellness programs or giving out food. But with my part, I've had a falling off of students attending the program since the fires. Some of them have lost their homes. Some of them literally are living with relatives every other night and trying to make it. And with most of the students that I serve who are Latino, then there's the ICE issue and just a lot of stuff, you know, coming down on the set of real. So a lot of those statistics do resonate with me. And I would add, just real quick, so I became a trauma-informed specialist through a program a couple of years ago and realized as I was going through the program that I didn't know I had a lot of trauma myself and what an awakening that is. So definitely to help the students and better inform them of their own trauma is, it's been a blessing.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that, Stephen. Thank you so much. And when you're talking about, right, those kids that you were just mentioning, right, they've experienced fire way too close, right? Way too close. They've lost their home. For some of those youth, right, you made a comment about how one night there was this relative, then that relative, right? Unfortunately, right, for so many of our kids, it's not just like one little trauma, right? It's trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. So my heart hurts for your children that you're working with. And I really appreciate your sharing that experience and a little bit more about where you're from and what you guys are seeing.
Archie Honrado, Los Angeles. I was the city coordinator, 2010, 2011. I work in rural America now here in Humboldt in California, in the Redwoods. And yeah, that data is really very, even in rural America. And I'm a substance abuse counselor right now at the county jail. I'm actually here in the jail right now, my work. And yeah, I've seen a lot of young people come here, and I try to really keep an eye on them. And we have African Americans are a very minority here, and so they experience more trauma here, being a really small number of them. And I really try to catch them because they easily fall in the cracks as far as the services that's available for them here. So they tend to really be traumatized more than the other groups. But I also work a lot with the tribes that we have here as the most populous tribe in California, up in northern. So yeah, the data is really right on there.
All right, thanks, Archie. Appreciate you sharing. And shout out to you, right? Working in a jail, I'm often hanging out in a detention center, so I appreciate that. Right, there's wonderful opportunities to do some real great work in ministry in those settings. So thanks for what you do.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hello, how you doing? If I might say, oh, okay, go ahead, brother. No, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
You got the, all right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Shannon, Boston in the house. Cohort graduating on April 11th. And it's an honor to be here. Thank you, everybody, the presenters. Dr. Franklin, good to see you, sir. So yes, I've to echo what some of the individuals have said. It also in Springfield, where we were serving, there was actually a killing of a young student that was in high school. Wasn't one of my youth, but however, it was a friend of the youth in the church in one way, shape, or another form. And so that was very traumatic for them, and not having a space to be able to, enough spaces to be able to process that, either in the school setting or outside of myself or my wife, not being able to, and then with that, not being in, it's just statistically, being in the Black community, therapy and mental health is something that we shy away from or run under the rug. And so even if they know that they need some help or they were reaching out to us, then the conversation also transcends to the parents, who culturally that's not something we do. So then that can add a little bit another layer of whatever, because they're not able to fully go to their parents or their grandparents and say, hey, I'm feeling depressed. What's depressed? You know, that's not a thing that is, it's like, it's not a real thing. And in the community. So that was definitely, and also as they've echoed in ICE, Boston is getting hit, Springfield, the areas where really they're coming in and starting to try and get into the schools, whether it's by one way or another. Even I don't know how in the other areas are, but they're mandating that the bus drivers have to continue driving if they see anyone in uniform or anything of the sort at the bus stops. So that again is another layer of whatever. And then if it's not the person themselves having to live in it, being in the community that you know so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. So yeah, those were some of the things that I'm seeing.
Thanks, Shannon. I really appreciate that. Right, like you said, it's hard enough, right, for some of our youth and families, right, to go through the trauma they're going through based upon family circumstances that, you know, especially kids often don't have control over. But then, yes, all those other compounding factors, just so traumatic and so tough. And again, even if it's not their family, like you said, just witnessing what they're seeing in their community is just devastating. Samantha, I see your hand raised, but I'm going to go to Mr. Alexander first because I think he jumped in too. So.
Hey, how you doing? Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for this particular conversation. I'll be a graduate in April the 25th of this year of DVULI. Woohoo! Basically, where I come into play with this is I've suffered from depression and mental health and anxiety myself. But what I do is try to take an approach to talk to children as an advocate. I got my advocacy from the Confess Project of America, based out of Little Rock, Arkansas, and they've expanded now to Atlanta. And basically, they had created an opportunity for me to be the ambassador for the state of Kentucky to speak to this. So basically, every year, 2 million youth attempt suicide. More than 25% of them succeed between the ages of 10 and 24. And what's also traumatic about that, in our case, as far as African Americans, only 4% are clinicians in America. Um, so it's hard to really talk and speak to someone who looks like you and can identify with your traumas and your situations of where you come from, versus anybody else of another ethnic background. So that's the goal, is to try to encourage more people to become therapists, not just more people of color, that where we can feel comfortable and safe about speaking about the traumas and social ills that plague our communities.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for one, sharing a little bit about yourself, and then two, right, your role in that way. And I do appreciate you bringing up the suicide statistics, because they are absolutely just troubling. And as you mentioned, right, where is that opportunity then for our youth to be able to receive services, right, that are culturally relevant and that people feel like that's a really good spot, safe and a good spot for them to be, right? Somebody who they can relate to. So appreciate you sharing that so much. Thank you. Samantha.
Good afternoon, everybody. Samantha, I graduated from the Twin Cities in 2009. I'm currently living in Austin, Texas. So I'm a little bit of everywhere. But I just want to kind of speak to the counseling and mental health from a perspective of a career counselor. That's what I do for pay. I'm a career counselor, but because there's such a lack of social workers, mental health workers in the state of Texas, again, kind of speaking to the previous gentleman's comment, especially those who are of ethnic base. As a career counselor, I hear and see a lot of the mental health status. And if you know anything about counseling, I'm a psychology major working on my master's. If you know anything about it, a career counselor is in the mental health profession circle. But then also, when you think about the person as a whole, yes, I'm trying to help these students get jobs, but if they don't have the mental stability to work the job, then they're not going to be able to complete the circle. So we got to treat them as a whole. So I'm talking to students who are, I believe last month was domestic violence awareness for students. Yeah, it's a real thing. I've been on campuses when there was serious emergencies happening, like deaths from fights. And a lot of this is stimulating from mental health, from nobody being able to speak to these students, nobody being able to just give them a listening ear. So I hear that. I hear a lot of what you're saying. It resonates with me being the person on the campus. I also, in my volunteer work, I work with all the juveniles in one of our county's detention centers. So I see it, I hear it in all angles. And I believe 100% that these stats, if we don't do something about them, it's going to get worse.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Samantha, for sharing, and congratulations on your work on your master's. Very exciting. So, and thanks for what you're doing, right, in your professional work and in your volunteer work. Really appreciate that. Wes, see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, my name is Wes. I'm from Grand Rapids as well. Shout out to you, Samantha. I used to be a career counselor myself at Calvin University. So I know what that work is like. But currently, I'm just joining DVULI, so I'll be in the 2026 cohort next spring. So looking forward to starting next month. And so I work with student athletes. So with me being a former student athlete myself, I believe the lie that like I played basketball. So basketball is the only thing that will like help me feel better, or it's my sanctuary. Like it can be to an extent, right? But a lot of the athletes that we work with that I know, they just think that their sport is like their sanctuary, right? But then as the higher you get, the more serious the sport becomes, and then it becomes not your sanctuary anymore. It becomes like your main stressor. So just like trying to help athletes navigate through that, and then help them develop an identity outside of their sport, because I struggled with that mightily when I was done playing basketball. It's like, who am I? I don't know. I'm not a basketball player anymore. I didn't invest in anything else. I struggled. So that's a thing that I think a lot of athletes struggle with in general, especially after they're done playing.
Sure. Thanks, Wes. Really appreciate it. Very excited, fellow Grand Rapids person here. So excited to meeting you more in the future. And yeah, right. I really appreciate what you're talking about, right? Is how do we help you, whether they're basketball students or in something else, right? Where do they find identity, right? And how much of our identity really does play into our mental health and how we perceive ourselves, our level of anxiety, depression, and all those other types of things. So yeah, really, really appreciate your thoughts on that. Thanks so much for sharing. Anybody else? Oh, go ahead.
I will go. I'm Benita Hopkins. I'm San Francisco class of 2015 and a current liaison for the Northern and Central California region. And I'm a teacher by profession. And I really resonated with, I don't know who it was earlier who mentioned my population primarily at my school is 70% Hispanic. And the students and their families are afraid, and more so than ever. Absenteeism, we have noticed in the last couple of months, has soared. And we have parents who are calling and looking, begging for godparents for their children in case they are going to be taken. We have things in place for if ICE comes to campus, because we have had families who started out in the morning together, but when it's time to come home for dinner, they don't all get to come home. So the trauma is real. And I really resonated with whomever said the trauma upon us youth workers as well is also real. So
It was me.
knowing ways and knowing information and ways to deal with that vicarious trauma and having those self motivators to be able to take care of ourselves is also important. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Benita, for sharing. And I really appreciate, again, that resonation, right, with vicarious trauma, secondary trauma. I was going to say that'll probably be one of those resources that I'll also be sure to share. That was actually my dissertation topic, so I'm very passionate about that topic. So we'll definitely make sure to get some of those resources out to you guys as well. Thanks so much for sharing your experience and what you're doing.
Oh, I think we're having a great conversation. These two first topics questions have been great. We would like to just to go forward and see what barriers have you guys encountered, and also what kind of steps have you been taking from wherever you're at dealing with youth and mental health. So who wants to start and continue the conversation?
My name is Eva Snade, and I am in the current DVULI cohort in Louisville. I will be graduating this April as well. One of the barriers, well, the biggest barrier is the at-risk youth that we work with at Power Inc. Most of them don't want to, mental health is like, I'm not crazy, you know, that cliche of, ain't nothing wrong with me, you know, and then culturally, we're taught to pray about it, give it to God. And you don't discuss what goes on in your house. I mean, that's what I was taught too as well. And so one of the things we do is we kind of like, we trick them, as what I like to say. We kind of like trick them into doing group therapy and mental health. They don't even realize by the time that we finish, we done a whole group therapy session and everybody's woosah. So, and that's one of the things that I enjoy doing most. I 20 years of experience of working with state government, and I worked as a benefits specialist for foster and adoptive children. And so I saw the systematic part of, you know, foster care and reading the petitions of all the trauma that the youth that went through, and being, once they came into the system, unfortunately, they endured trauma. But actually starting an organization and actually trying to be part of the solution, and it's very rewarding for me.
That's great. Thank you, Eva. I think this is one of the main conflicts of mental health and youth from a Christian perspective. This idea of we're not crazy and God will handle it. So I think this is something that will come up in our meetings, and you should be aware. Thank you, Eva, once again. Who wants to continue with barriers?
I just wanted to add, one of like Ava said, the barriers of culture, the barriers of religion, but also as youth workers, sometimes our students don't feel comfortable approaching us because we are looked at as the authority. And I always like, I can dress like I'm ready to go to court, or I can dress like I'm ready to play basketball, even though I cannot play basketball at all, but I will get out there and I will pretend if it means that I get to have this rapport with the student in any way, you know, like people laugh at me all the time, and I'm still working on trying to get this rolled off on my taxes, but I am a huge sneakerhead. Part of that is because if a student sees my shoes, the first thing they're going to say, "Oh, miss, you got on the joy," blah, blah, blah. And it opens up the conversation, and it takes me from here to now I'm on their level. And so I think, and I tell people all the time, I'm trying to be approachable by youth. I can talk to an adult all day long. It's the kids that need to be heard and they need ears. So I think biggest thing, if I could say anything to it, would be as a youth worker, being approachable.
Thank you, Samantha. That's some great information, and I think she just gave us a clue in how to be approachable with our youth. Sometimes we just, you know, we have to dress like them sometimes. You know, it's not every day, but you have to do. Um, so who else? I think Mr. Shannon, right? Did you raise your hand? Yes. No. Come on, come on. I saw that hand up.
I was gonna, so as my sister Samantha was talking, she was just literally saying what I was gonna say, because as a real life example for me and my wife and I, in the ministry, we were very strategic in having our youth not call us by our church given titles. So we were very strategic in not having them call me minister, for the simple fact that we did not want to create that separation that we have seen from being in the church all of our lives, or so on and so forth, and understand and having the conversations, the real conversations, and taking the time with the youth to understand that they, like Samantha said, that we're not approachable from just the title, from the way we dress, from the way, even the way I'm very expressive in service, and anyone that's been in the conferences can see. And so the way sometimes we behave, or how we express ourselves in worship, it can make it seem like, okay, I'm not like that, quote unquote, I don't fall out. So then therefore it's something, I can't approach that individual because they're holier or they're here. Unfortunately, titles and stuff put us on a pedestal sometimes that people don't necessarily mean to put us on there, but we have done it just by the structure, the hierarchy of our environments. So yeah, that's literally it. Like she said, dressing the part. There were Sundays that I would literally make sure I'm going in a hoodie and whatever, to make sure that I looked presentable. When we go to large conferences, large fellowship services, if I don't have to wear a clergy collar, I'm not wearing a clergy collar because of so on and so forth. So yeah, those were the things. And in addition, just again, the parents are sometimes culturally, we worked with a lot of Caribbean West Indians. Myself is half, and so on and so forth. But that was very difficult because, again, it's pray about it, and then you're not praying enough, you're not fasting enough. So if you're not praying, you're not fast. Which one? There's one of the two that you're not doing enough of. And then with having the multiple generations, again, we have kids that. An individual that was cutting themselves, my wife and I knew. Parents found out later, and we tried to explain to the parent, hey, your child needs to speak to you and talk to you. We were able to get the school involved, but the parent was in such a position that the child didn't feel comfortable saying, hey, I'm not doing well today, or whatever it is, or let's explore. And then never mind medication. It's just whatever, like and so just the layer again, the medication, then it's like, okay, there are instances in which we need to be on something to be able to regulate ourselves, to be able to, even in the moment till we can get to the next level, and that is shunned as well. And so, yeah, those type of things in the environment, working in the ministry for sure.
Thank you very much.
I think if I might chime, I think one of the biggest barrier is the stigma of mental health, you know, and in my context, when I sit down with youth that has dual diagnosis with mental health and substance use, the trauma-informed approach of just trying to be like an uncle, or you know, and I would listen to the story, and until some of the generational trauma will surface naturally through storytelling, you know, and that was one of my favorite thing to do, is to sit down and let the story of the people of their, you know, people comes out, and then I go from there, as far as getting them open to talk about their anxiety, their, you know, the correlation of their substance use to, you know, growing up with parents with are alcoholic and stuff. So I think the helping the young people understand the story of their people, and in trying to destigmatize the connection of their mental health, you know, to the neighborhood or the people that they belong.
Thank you very much, Archie. That's a great comment. We have to work with this even from the church, right? Even from our position, and the youth is where we at, and we have to work with that. You just reminded me of something when you mentioned storytelling. I'm a CBT therapist for a couple of years already, but I used to work a lot with narrative therapy. And it seems like storytelling, that could be something that you guys could look into. So thank you very much. Berkeley, you have your hands. So
Yes. So I think what has already been said was kind of on my mind too, but I think I would add, I'm looking at it as not so much what is the challenge, or why the youth may not want mental health, but I have a step I have to take before that, and my challenge has been building relationships and really connecting, because I feel like if I connect with them, and I've been successful lately, it's taken a minute, but I've been successful more so lately, then anything that I would present to them, if I build that trust that, okay, Mr. Stephen, if you say that I should have therapy, then I think that I will do that. And so far, I've gotten at least one student to say yes, because we have interns that work with us at STAR. So we have plenty of social workers, therapists that are working on their master's degrees, and they're needing the hours to work with our organization. So that's been pretty successful. But I do like a lot of the things. So I think that's what makes these kinds of meetings great, because you can hear what someone else shares, and then you can gain from that and take it back to your organization too. So I liked what Samantha said about the sneakers. And so sometimes I will wear something on purpose, and somebody will tell me, "Why are you wearing that? You're just going to work." But that impression is that when I walk through that door, they're not going to forget what I have on. And so if that can start a conversation, then that's what I'm going to do. And then our program has been privileged to be part of campuses now that are allowing us in Pasadena. So I facilitated a session, and when they called my name, the teacher said, "Now you're in the hands of Stephen Berkeley." The first thing I did when I walked up, I said, "They're not like us. They're not like us." And that's how I opened up. I had the whole class, and it didn't matter what I said after that. I had their attention. So that's what I wanted to share. So
that's just great. Just wanna add to that you mentioned the importance of creating relationships, and it's not only with the leader, right? But we should be focused also creating relationships with them and other people around them. These types of mentoring programs are very helpful sometimes to create relationships. And not everyone needs therapy, right? Even though if we know what it does, that's what I work in, but it's not necessarily. And what Samantha said I just want to bring up again, it's very important, and I use that with my vocabulary. My vocabulary changes depending with who am I speaking. It's not that we go crazy with this, right? But that has to change. That has to change. So did I see somebody else raise their hand? Okay, yes, Phil.
Yes, so first of all, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this discussion. Very interesting. As you can see with these white whiskers, I'm an old brother, been around for a while. But one of the things over the years that's happened to me is I've contracted vitiligo. My wife and I, we have 7 kids, and when my oldest kids were in their teen years, they did some crazy things, and we were just trying to get our church off the ground. I mean, there was a lot of stress in my life. In my case, this was stress related. But my vitiligo, just like Samantha's tennis shoes, has always been one way people I want to identify with me. They want to know if I was been burned, if it's a chemical reaction. There's always questions, which in the beginning, I was really self-conscious and I felt like a freak. But then when I realized I am a freak and I can use this as an opportunity to start a discussion, it really helped. But I was thinking about, in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, if you don't mind me sharing a couple of verses, the Apostle Paul writes, "We think you ought to know, dear brothers and sisters, about the trouble we went through in the province of Asia. We were crushed and overwhelmed beyond our ability to endure, and we thought we would never live through it." It's really a description of mental health issues, trauma issues that we're facing. Verse 9, he says, "In fact, we expected to die, but as a result, we stopped relying on ourselves and learned to rely only on God who raises the dead. And he did rescue us from mortal danger, and he will rescue us again. We have placed our confidence in him, and he will continue to rescue us." I was just thinking, one of the ways that I've been able to relate with young people as well as old people is to be able to frame my trauma into a victory story. And again, I know the church doesn't always come off being relevant and loving and wants to put young people into check. But the reality is we do have a God that does care about us. And I think even using our own experiences with mental health issues or trauma can really be the springboard to help free others, young people, from the trauma they're facing. Just wanted to throw that in. I'm not trying to preach. I know Shannon's got her finger on the mute button, so she could turn me off at any time, but I just wanted to add that in there.
Thank you, Phil. That was beautiful. Thank you for that verse. And with that, we close that question with your experience.
That's great. Thanks, everybody. Hey, Bernard, I'm just kind of curious, given your experience, what are you hearing that's kind of resonating with you, or is there something else that's on your mind that you wanted to kind of add to this conversation? Great depth of conversation going on right now.
Yeah, great. Wow. A lot that I want to bring. Let me just say that I hope this isn't the first time you all do this, and it's not the last time. I like to believe in God that we should pray for purpose and intention for big things that happen in our lives. For example, I think there were some significant changes to the church that came out of COVID. But we will spend so much time talking about the negative aspects of COVID that we miss what was God trying to say to us from COVID. Here we are now in a brutal period in our country. It would be easy for us to lament and be angry like a lot of other folks, but we ought to stop and say, okay, God, what is it I'm supposed to learn? And what is it I'm supposed to do? Because what I would want you to understand as we move forward, and I don't want you to take my words and put it on the back of the children that you're working with, because they already have enough pressure. But you and I will be off the scene. You and I will be off the scene when America has to rebuild social structures, social systems, and an economy. The children that you're working with are the very ones who are going to have to step in and try to rebuild some of these very systems that are being destroyed. So what would God say to us today then? God would say to us that we need to figure out new paradigms, new systems, new processes, so that we can build up young people so that they have the resilience, they have the character, they have the ability to stand. This is where I work from. This is my space that I'm in. This is what I feel called to do. I'm going to take a minute here. I know you all probably want to jump in and say something, but let me just frame it, because I don't want to walk away from this with a big cloud of conversation that we've already had. I want to try to narrow us down so that we have purpose, so that we know what we're talking about and we can walk away with a plan. I came into this work saving my daughter. My wife died in 2004. We had an adopted daughter, was 8. She spiraled out of control. I mean, spiral. She was put out of every school. I have a counseling psych background, but I tell people my counseling psych and behavioral studies background was Freudian. Freud knew nothing about the brain. Freud talked about what parents and family systems did to impact us, but he had no concept of the brain. So I put my daughter in a home for troubled girls, and I went to learn about trauma. And I went deep into trauma because that was important. I was determined my daughter was not going to get pregnant, and she was not going to have to struggle the rest of her life. From there, I went to work for the Kansas City Chiefs. Right now, I'm working with gang-involved young people. And in these three instances, what I want you to understand is that people who face trauma, their blood flow is in the amygdala, which is in this part of the brain, the part of the brain that's fight, flight, freeze. Fight, flight, freeze. That's where the blood is. Because it's there, they have developed such a neurological system that they can hone in quickly on somebody else who may impact them, hurt them, traumatize them. And so they have a radar. They can see through you, they can see around you, and they know when fake, they know when pretend, they know when you don't mean them good, but you're bringing your academic, you bringing your stuff to them, but you're not really bringing your heart and your soul. So friends, there's so much that I would want to say, but I want to say to you that are listening, the brother talked earlier about having his own trauma. We need to do our work. They know when you're bringing yourself and you're not ready for them. They know when you have issues. So I'm telling you, I'm working in Kansas City with gang-involved young men. I'm working in Providence, Rhode Island, and I'm working here in Boston. I can't come into a meeting pretending because the brothers on the street know Bernard's not real today. He's not ready today. He's not with us today. They'll call me an OG, and I know what they're saying. You're not here. You're not with us. And so, friends, I just need you to understand this concept. And then the next piece I would want us to frame, we tend to focus on mental health and the brain as if we don't have anything else on our body. God made us 4 parts. We're spiritual, we're physical, we're emotional, and we're psychological. We're brain. So all of those 4 parts have to be developed. You can't just talk about mental health and the brain. You have to talk about what we do with our body because trauma is stored in the body. And so part of what we do in our work is try to figure out how we have healthy systems that allow our kids to move, to dance, to do things that allow them to move. There are terms I want to bring: somatic therapy. We need to figure out how we do that. I just got back from India, and part of what you're feeling and sensing, I'm frustrated with America's mental health system. A piece that you all didn't describe clearly, less than 1% of all mental health therapists, psychologists, social workers in America are men of color. Less than 1%. So the brothers I work with will not go to therapy, even if they believed in therapy, because they're not going to say to a female therapist that mama's boyfriend who was on coke raped him when he was 10. He's not going to tell a woman that. He needs to have a brother who can sit down with him. So I'm tired in my work because I'm pulled on in a lot of different directions by people who need an African-American therapist to help this other brother. So we do need to pray. But my point is, we need to figure out how we raise up practitioners So I need you all to think about being certified coaches, certified trainers, certified leadership consultants, because we can't wait for brown and black people to become psychologists and social workers. We got to figure out how we do this work. So part of that is you need to change your whole style of living, because you can't tell somebody how to look at their body and if they're sleeping and you get by on 4 or 5 hours of sleep yourself. I'm asking all the guys that I work with to bring to me each week. We do a circle. We're not doing therapy because I can't get a therapist. I'm not going to, but we do a circle. So I think it was Eva or someone, Samantha, you all talked about group work. That's where we're going to get a lot of our progress from, is doing group work, is to have a healing circle every week, because you give the kids permission to talk to each other. You give them permission to say their troubles, and then you can say when it gets too far, okay, now that's enough. You can talk to me after our group meeting, because I don't want you to say all of it to everybody. But my point is, we need to change our habits. Kids who are strung out on trauma, their taste buds change. They want sugar, they want starch, they want salt, and they want caffeine. You tell them they can't have that, but you're doing it. You tell them they need more sleep, but you're not sleeping. You're saying to them, you need to learn how to be quiet, but you have music all the way from the time you get in your car to your destination. And so all the things that we do that contribute to poor mental health, we're doing those, and we're trying to figure out how we calm kids down, but they're watching you. They're getting it from parents. They're getting it from adults. And so there's a lot here that I will come back. I would be happy to sit down with you. I have a whole script here. I went to Africa. I went to India because the World Health Organization says that India, South Africa, Uganda, and Nigeria are doing the best work with mental health for the poor. America is not even listed because we're not even scratching the surface of how we take care of the poor and mental health. I went to a college or a school of 40,000 young people. They were serving young people. If you saw Cast, the movie, you saw the Dalits, the Untouchable. This is the class right above the Untouchables, 40,000 of them on one campus. And they've learned how to understand the 4 parts of the body, spiritual. I know I'm going too long and y'all probably want me to stop. We got to get to a place where we stop talking about New Age just when we tell some kids to stop and get a breath, just when we take a 1 minute time to do meditation. So many of our churches are talking about that's New Age. Friends, we need to figure out how we slow down, how we just take a breath. So anyway, there's so much that I could share with you all that I want, because we need to change our paradigm and ask God, what is it you're wanting us to learn in this dramatic period of our country? And I'll stop.
I'll just jump in here real quick and say we always send out notes and things from these calls. And so, Bernard, if you want to send anything to Stephanie, that resources, recommendations, books, links, whatever, we'll make sure that those get out to everyone who is on the call. And that goes for everyone. If you have resources to share, feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can send them right along to Stephanie, and we will get them out to everyone.
Great, thanks for that reminder.
Your library should have The Body Keeps the Score. Bessel van der Kolk. That should be in your library. Number 2 should be Waking the Tiger by let's see, I always forget his name, Peter Levine. Peter Levine talks about trauma that resides in the body. And then I would get anything by Dr. Nadine Burke Harris.
Yes.
Quite an astounding woman who's done a lot of work. Those 3 authors ought to be in your library.
Those are great reminders. Thank you so much, Bernard, for sharing. And yes, those are on my resource list as well that I was going to have Stephanie send out afterwards. Some of my favorite authors right there. Appreciate your thoughts and your wisdom. I think I saw somebody, Samantha, did you have your hand raised?
I was just Mr. Franklin. Is it Dr. Franklin or Mr. Franklin?
Bernard's fine.
I was gonna say, if you don't have the Body Keeps the Score in your library, you're missing out. Like
Yes.
that has been eye-opening, challenging. I go back to it and reference it all the time. And there's another one, and I can't think of his name, but he did a lot of work out in Waco. He has a huge school in Dallas, but he talks about how, like you were saying, our student or youth in general, anybody, when we're stressed, we have certain foods that we crave, and that's because it is a trigger for the triggers that we experience cause certain things in our taste buds to be also triggered. So salty, we see a lot of our kids who eat like flaming hot Cheetos. That's because it's a trigger response. It's a trauma response. So it's also one of those things you got to pick up on what your students are, or your youth, whoever you work with, what they're doing, what they're showing you, because they're telling you by what they're displaying what they have going on. If they're eating pickles, real sour pickles, that's also a trauma response. Like they're telling you, are you paying attention is the question.
One of the other big ones is dehydration. So the brain can't function. We can't function as human beings. We are a culture, a world culture that lives in a dehydrated state almost 24/7. We wake up after dehydrating all night, breathing out air. And one of the first things many of us get is a cup of coffee, which is a diuretic. It will drain more water from us. And so the same with our kids. They'll have a Pepsi first thing in the morning, a Mountain Dew in the afternoon. And so the brain sits in a little sack of water and the brain can't function. It can't fire. It can't get its charge when it's dehydrated. And so it's diet, it's water, it's sleep, friends, it's so much.
Wow, guys, thank you all so much for bringing all sorts of, resources and commentary to, our attention and to this conversation. I will say this is rare. We will allow for up to another 15 minutes after the hour if you want to continue this dialogue. Our moderators have some additional prompts and commentary that they have prepared. But at the same time, we don't want to hold anybody over. If you have to jump off, feel free. But I will say this, we will allow up to 15 past the hour for an additional conversation. Again, Shannon has mentioned that actually a copy of this conversation will be made available to everybody that's been in attendance. We'll send you the link to this conversation as well. It'll be posted on our YouTube page also. And I'll turn it back over to Ann until we are done, but no later than a quarter past the hour.
Great. Thanks, Gerald. Really appreciate that.
Yep.
So great depth of conversation, so many ideas, so much knowledge and depth of experience in this group. I'm kind of curious, as we're working with young people, right? Bernard gave us some resources. I'm kind of curious, what tools are people using in your work? Are there specific curriculums or anything like that that you're using that are finding beneficial in working alongside of youth, particularly as Bernard said, right? That kind of whole child, whole person model.
One of my favorites is Love Notes. Love Notes is a evidence-based curriculum that teaches the youth how to recognize the signs of unhealthy relationships and how to have healthy relationships, not just romantic relationships, but it makes them become aware of some of the baggage that they bring. Even as adults, we don't realize how we bring some of that baggage from our childhood with us into the relationships, whether it's romantic or friendships. It touches on domestic violence. It touches on knowing who you are. So identity touches on a lot of different things. And the youth are very receptive because they implement music as part of the curriculum. And I allow them to bring in songs and I'll give them free reign. And I learn a lot about the new culture and music. I'm old school, but I learn about the new culture music and the youth love it. So that's one of my favorites.
Thanks, Eva. I really appreciate that. That's great.
Yeah, I didn't introduce myself, but I'm Melvin Cole. I'm in Kansas City, Missouri. Dr. Bernard, good to see you, brother. I been a part of DVULI since 2001. graduate 2001, 2002. I tried to slip in. I heard about them back in 2001. But anyway, I hope you can hear me. Got some noise around me. But humor is a really big thing with me, getting kids to laugh. So I'm always looking for good comedians, and they're mainly Christian communities. I'm sorry, Christian comedians, kind of a tongue twister for me. But getting kids to relax by laughing. I'm really big on joy, the fruit of joy. And so those are some of the things, just one of the things that we use. But I got a lot of questions because I really enjoy each one sharing. I'm not directly connected to working. I'm not a psychologist or anything. I'm a pastor of a church right now. I've been a part of a youth ministry that's been going on for about 30 years in Kansas City called Freedom Fire. And we work with a lot of kids in the under-resourced communities. But we've seen a lot of bullying. And I don't know if that's a trauma response from from how kids behave and what they're going through at home. There's just been a lot of abuse. I know, excuse me, I know a lot of kids are being abused at home, verbally abused. It's not always physical, but verbally abused, and then they carry that over into their with their friends and their community when they're together at school or wherever they hang out. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out, get some responses or whatever, maybe later on.
Thanks, Melvin. I really appreciate that. I was going to say for myself, I definitely see bullying every day. I mean, I just think it is so prevalent for our kids, and I think it's a combination of a trauma response. I think for some of our kids, it's that one opportunity to gain some sort of control in their life and to try to establish themselves in the hierarchy. I think for other kids, it's what is modeled at home. Certainly, I think we're seeing some of that nationally as well about what is being modeled, about what's acceptable behavior and what's not. Obviously, I have strong opinions about that, but I just think, unfortunately, there's so many things that are kind of hitting our kids that I think it's an unfortunate yet a natural consequence that we're seeing so much bullying going on. So really appreciate your thought, Melvin. Thank you so much. Benita, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, you were asking about resources or other things, and I just wanted to throw out the healing-centered approach. I've been certified in that. It focuses on cultural humility and compassion and empathy, empowerment, trust and transparency, and hope and resilience. Is by Dr. Sean Ginwright here at the University of San Francisco State, actually. And it goes a little bit deeper, further than the trauma-informed approach is the premises there, but something else to look into, the healing-centered approach.
Great, thanks, Benita. We'll definitely add that to our list of resources. Much appreciated. Anybody else have any other tools or curriculum that you want to share? And again, as it was mentioned, people can certainly email those in and we can certainly add those to the list of tools or curriculums they're using right now.
I guess what I would recommend, me being spiritual director, is, the practice of centering prayer, and Dr. Franklin mentioned about the brain. The centering prayer is really, some of the monks call it like a part of divine therapy. Part of that is centering prayer does not involve a lot of discursive, imaginative emotion. So it's a different part of the brain that is engaged, as part of that neuroscience, neurotheology, the neuroscience theology that said that when you do centering prayer, there's part of the brain that is engaged, that is like the God DNA, if you will. So I guess what I'm saying is, if we can cultivate that in our youth group, teaching them this contemplative centering prayer that is different from the quiet time that we teach them, from the meditation that is very multisensory or discursive or reasoning. Pray at all times with all kinds of prayer. We got intercession, meditation, thanksgiving. But centering prayer is not taught to us. And so it's something to look into. And so that's one of the resources I would highly recommend for our youth group.
Great. Thank you so much, Archie. Really appreciate that insight and your sharing.
Archie, can you tell me what that was again? I want to look it up and see how to,
Centering prayer.
Thank you.
It's an old ancient Christian prayer practice that somehow in the Industrial Revolution we forgot to teach it to, to our young people, and it's so relevant today.
Great. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Tools or curriculum that you're using that you want to share with the group?
Hi, this is Katrina. Can you hear me?
A little bit. It's really hard to hear.
Is this better?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, I'll try to talk louder. Sorry. Let me see.
Oh, are you still there, Katina? Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, that's beautiful. Yes.
Sorry about that. I'm at work. One of the things that I did with my kids is, and it's something that the Holy Spirit gave me, was using balloons and index cards as a way of communication. A lot of what was said today is so applicable to how we relate to our kids. And so the balloon method is simply you have any color balloons and you have Sharpies. And so when you're in circle time or what have you, you give the kids permission to write down any words that have been spoken against them, either by themselves or family members, whomever, that have played a part in how they self-identify. And it's a time exercise. And once you complete that, then you give them the option to share or not share. But after all of that ends, then you do what's called the promise scream. So if anybody has ever given birth or you've been in a room where birth was taking place, you know what it is to like go down in your guts and just let it all out, if you will. And so the promise scream helps to connect a lot of what people have been saying, that bodily response to those emotions that they've basically carried for so long. And after the promise screen is concluded, then everyone pops the balloon. So the promise screen kind of is simultaneously with popping the balloon. And it just allowed people to get out so much information that they had never shared with people. And if they don't want to share what's on their balloon, they don't have to. The goal of it is to get out part of what has been packed down so deep down inside. The same thing with the index cards. It allows them to write out what they've been carrying, and then they can decide to either tear it up, burn it, or carry it until they're ready to let go. But the goal of it is so it's a mixture of theories, if you will, coming together. Those two components have worked very well because it takes away the threat of someone knowing my secret if I'm not ready to share, while allowing people to get out what they've been carrying. And another context that has really helped is it's something I learned from psychology over 30 years ago. Is helping people identify how they see themselves so that when we are working with them, we're working from the standpoint of where the person is. So you take a piece of paper and you just ask them, draw a picture of yourself. And again, it's a timed exercise, but the goal of it is to get a glimpse of what they're thinking about themselves. So if you think about a regular 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, it's a sizable piece of paper, but I've had kids draw a stick picture no bigger than the size of an eraser on a pencil, and then some have drawn the size of the paper. And so the goal of it is just to gain information, and then from that point, build out how to interact with them in terms of curriculum. I've just found those activities to be very helpful. Also, along with music as well, helping people to appreciate how they can translate the words that they hear into how it impacts thought, action, and deed. And then if if you're in a space where you need to go biblical, show the revelation between, because there are some songs out there, secular and non-secular, that help to explain what people are feeling without them feeling like they're wrong for feeling those feelings, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks, Katina, for sharing, and I really appreciate, right, again, the interactive nature of it that tries to really establish a safe opportunity for kids to share or to not share, but again, to have that opportunity, right, to really be expressive and in a really interactive and safe way. So thank you so much for sharing that. Anybody else? Otherwise, I think, David, was there one more question yet for us to kind of walk through with everybody?
There is one more question, and it's about what professional development resources should be on everyone's radar. And we're having a great conversation, so I bet you guys have resources. If anybody has any resources, please let us know, maybe in 30 seconds, 45 seconds. Any seminars, conferences, anything that you think we should take.
I would email my suggestions.
That's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, Tina.
I'll
Anybody else is gonna
I'll just say this, man. If nothing else, get to know who these people are on this call. There's a depth. There's conferences in each and every one of you right here. I mean, I could just sit and listen and absorb and grow and be impacted in some phenomenal ways by those that are that are talking today. So, and that's what this is all about, for us to be a resource to one another. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yep. All right, if that is it, I want to say again, thanks to Ann Heerde and David Medina for moderating the call today. Good to have everybody on. My brother Steve Young, who jumped in a different time zone. Man, it's been so many years. Good to have you on as well. He's one of our Twin Cities alumni, now living in the California area and doing some phenomenal stuff there. Some school-based mental health counseling and wellness in Sacramento. And so blessed to see you with us, Steve, also. And definitely couldn't leave without saying and acknowledging the presence of Denise Fozzie, one of our staff liaisons to Grand Rapids, who's with us as well, and my esteemed colleague, Shannon Popovan, who's been on also. She's producing this for us in the background there, so thanks to her also. Again, good to have you all on. This is a phenomenal conversation. We will do this again. We've been trying to do maybe one, maybe two a year, but if y'all want to do more, y'all happy, we'll figure it out, okay? But watch your emails from Stephanie. This conversation in its entirety, the link will be sent to you all. And you have an opportunity either to share this or re-listen. And like I said earlier, it'll be on our YouTube page as well. So great to have everybody on the conversation, and have a phenomenal weekend, and we'll do this again soon. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Hey, Coach Phil. He just got off.
Oh yeah.
Say
All right,
hi to
I'll tell him to reach out to you, man.
Yeah, tell him I said hello.
I sure will, Stephen. All right,
yeah.
take care.
Yeah, take it easy.
Yeah.